Hey everyone, it's Anthony from Pretty Printed here. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to create a basic user login system that is going to use a few different Flask extensions. So those Flask extensions are Flask-Login, Flask-SQLAlchemy, Flask-WTForms, and Flask-Bootstrap. So with those 4 extensions, we're going to build this user login system that I will show you right now. So it's going to have 4 sections to it. It's going to have a dashboard. It's going to have this index page, and it's also going to have a login form and a sign up form. So the sign up form is pretty simple. I'll create a user, me, and then I'll put in my email, and I'll create a password. So I'll say password. Sign up, it says new user has been created, and then you can go login, and it redirects you to a dashboard, and then you will see the name of the user that you logged in with. And then of course you can log out and it will redirect you back to the index page. So that's what we're going to be building in this video. So if you're interested in learning how to do this and how to use those 4 libraries to do something that's more realistic, stay tuned in this video. So here's where we're going to be starting. I've already created a main application file that has 4 routes: the index, login, sign up, and dashboard, and it returns templates that I've already created. I've initialized Flask-Bootstrap as well, so each one of these templates uses Flask-Bootstrap. So you can see the blocks here, the title block, the styles block, and the content block. And it's pretty much the same for each one of the template files. Of course, each template file is different because they do different things. But I didn't want to include me creating these files in the video because it's pretty boring and there's not much to learn from me writing HTML. So I've left that out, but I'll include a link to all this code as it exists right now, so you can start from where I'm starting. And of course, I'll include the finished code as well. So if you want to pick up where I start, you can do that, or you can just view the code when it's finished. So here's what it looks like when the server is running. So I have a home page, I have a login page, I have a sign up page, and then I have a dashboard. And right now, this is pretty simple stuff. I'm not going to do anything special with the views. It's just to kind of make our project look more real and make it more realistic, but it doesn't actually do anything. It's better than showing just plain white HTML files. So the very first thing I need to do is I want to take these login forms, this login form and this sign up form, and convert them to Flask-WTF. So the very first thing I'll do over here then in my code is I'll have to import Flask form from Flask-WTF. So if you see my previous videos using WTForms, you've seen me import the form class, but there's been a recent update to it. Well, not that recent, but within the past year, where instead of using form, you use something called Flask form. So everything is the same, it's just a different name. So just keep that in mind. If you want to use form, you should be able to. You probably can get away with it, but I recommend using Flask form simply because that's what the developers want you to do. And in addition to importing Flask form, I'm going to import some things from the actual WTForms library. So WTForms, I'm going to import 3 different fields that I'll be using between the 2 templates that I have. A string field, a password field, and I can't spell right now, and a Boolean field. So the Boolean field will be for the checkbox. And then while I'm at it, I'll import the validators that I'll use as well. So WTForms.validators, I'm going to use input required as a validator. I'll use email and the length validator. So those are all the imports that I need for WTForms. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to actually create the classes for the forms. So above my routes, but below the initializing of the app, I'll add my forms. So I'm going to keep everything in one file just to make things simple for the video. I always do it this way, but of course, if you want to separate things out, and you probably should, you'd have your forms in a separate file, you have your database stuff in another file, you have your routes in a different one, just to keep it organized as your app grows. But since this app will be relatively small, I'll keep everything in one file. It shouldn't be more than 100 lines. So the very first thing I'll create is the login form. So it inherits from Flask form, and it's going to have 3 fields. So let me go to the login form. I have the username field, the password field, and the remember me field. So I'll create those three here. So I'll create a username, and it's going to be a string, and the name of it is simply username. Next, I'll add the validators that are necessary for username. So I'll say the validators are going to be input required, and I'll have a length for username. So let's say the minimum length for my username is going to be 4, and the max length for a username is 15. And then I'll do something similar for password, but instead of a string, it's going to be a password field. I'll call it password, and then I'll add validators for it. So once again, I'll use input required because you have to have a password, and then the length will be similar. I'll say minimum password length will be 8 and maximum password length will be 80. And that 80 is a special number that I'll explain about later, but it's not important right now. And then finally, I'll have the remember me checkbox. So remember, it's going to be a Boolean field, and I'll simply give it a name. It doesn't need any other kind of validator on it. So there's the login form. So I have the class in my Flask app. Now I need to actually pass that class to my form, or to the form in the template. And then I can use the Flask-Bootstrap things to actually create the HTML for the form. So first thing I'll do is I'll instantiate a form here in the login route. So I'll call it form. It's going to be a login form. And then in my render template, I will simply pass the form to the template so I can use it. So here, where's my login template? I have forms already, but these are Bootstrap forms. So I'm going to get rid of those and replace them with the form from Flask-WTF. So first I'll get rid of the username form. And well, first thing I need is I need the hidden tag for Flask-WTF. This is basically the cross-site request forgery token. And then after that, I'll add the actual username field. So I'll do WTF. And before I forget, I think I need to import the things from Flask-Bootstrap that handle forms. So import bootstrap /wtf.html. And this will give us the functions that we need to use WTForms in the template. So WTF.form field, and I'm going to add the username there. I'll do the same thing for the password. So I'll get rid of the password HTML and I'll have it generated here. Form field form.password. And then finally, I'll get rid of the checkbox and I'll have it generated. So I'll do WTForm form field form.remember. And I'll save that. And while I'm here, I'll also add the method and action to the form. So it's going to be a post, and the action is going to be a post on the login route. So I'll save that, save this, and I'll refresh this. And the form should look a little different, but it should behave the same. So it's telling me that I need a secret key. So let me add the secret key here. So app config secret key. This is supposed to be secret. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, so you see my form looks a little different, but it's still basically the same thing. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the registration form. So first thing I have to do is create the class. And I'll call this register form. And it inherits from Flask form. And this one is going to have an email field, a username field, and a password field. So let me go to that one right now, the sign up, username, email, password. So email will be a string field. Doesn't matter what order you write these in. I'm writing email first, even though on the form it's username first. So input required. And then it has the email validator because it's supposed to be an email. And I believe this should say message. So message. And then finally, I'll have a length validator. So I'll say that the max email length can be 50. I'm not sure what the minimum would be, so I'll just leave that out. And then I'll do a username field, which is pretty much going to be the same as the one above. So I'll actually just copy and paste that just to keep the consistency. So username, and then password will be similar. So I'll copy and paste that, save it. And then in my sign up routes, I'll initialize the form, register form, and then I'll pass it to the template. And then I'll go to the template. I'll inherit from Flask-WTF, so import, I want that higher, import bootstrap / WTF.html as WTF. And then let me do the form action and method first. So method will be post. Action is going to be sign up. And then I'll simply remove everything. So first thing I need is the hidden tag. So form.hidden tag. And then I'll add in the 3 things that I will have on this form, which are the username, the email, and the password. So form.username, form email, and I'll wrap these in the form field function right now. I just wanted to remember the names. So WTF.form field, and I'll add the same for the following. So WTF.form field. Okay. So now my form should be complete here. So let me get rid of the other HTML. Save this, and let's see if the sign up form works. Okay. So once again, it looks a little different just because of the styling, and of course you can change that, but I'm not too concerned with that at the moment. So now that I have both forms working, I want to test and make sure I can actually post data and get the data from the form. So the very first thing I'll do is I'll work with a login form. So I have my if statement here, which will check and see if the form was submitted. And before I get to that, I should put the methods on each one of the routes to be both get and post, because I'll be using the same route for both. I'll just copy that and I'll put it here on the sign up route as well. So now I have the if form and then validates on submit. This basically checks and sees if the form has been submitted. If it has been submitted, it goes into this if block. If it hasn't been submitted, then it will not go into it and it will go to render the template. So if the form does get submitted, what I want to do is just return the data that gets submitted. So what I'll do is I'll put a header and I'll say something like, I'll just put a space between the username and the password. So what I'll do is I'll do form.username.data. So that's the data that was submitted with the form. I'll put a space, and then I'll do the same thing for the password. So form password data. And then I'll close out the header tag. So I'll save that and I'll go to the login route. And something failed. So let's see, invalid syntax. I think I just hit save too early before I actually completed it. So I'll run the server again and I'll go to the login route. Okay, so I'll put in any username. So I'll say user, and then the password is going to be password. So I should see this if everything works correctly, and I see it here. So user is what I put in for the username, and password is what I put in for the password. So I know the form is working. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the registration form just to make sure everything is working correctly. This is something good to do because I've gotten to situations so many times where I'm just so confident that things work and I just write code without testing it, and then I find out that one of the first things I wrote was all wrong and I have to go back and fix it. So it's nice to test as you go along, even if it's not going to be what you actually end up using. So With this, I'll do the same thing. I'll have a header, and then I'll return, in this case, the username, followed by a space, and then the email, so form.email.data. And then finally, I'll return the password, so form password data. And then I'll close out the header tag. So I'll save that, and I'll refresh this page, and I'll try test user. Email will be test@test.com, and then password will be secret. So let's see if it works. And the field must be between 8 and 80 characters long. So Flask-WTForms is working. So I'll say secret. Sign up, and I see test user, test@test.com, and then secret. So everything is working as expected. So now that I have the forms, I want to get into the actual meat of the application. So by that, I mean it's time to create the database. So first thing I'll do, I'll get out of this, and I'll create a SQLite database, and I'll call this database.db. And then I'll exit out of that, so I should have the database created there. And while I'm at it, I'll create the URI for it. So SQLAlchemy database URI is going to be SQLite // and then the spot on my computer where this database resides. So I believe it's documents login-examples /database.db. Okay, so I have the link to my database. So now I need to not inherit, but import Flask-SQLAlchemy. So from Flask_SQLAlchemy, import SQLAlchemy. And then I'll initialize it right below the Bootstrap initialization. All right, so the first thing I want to do is create a class that will represent a table in my database. And since we're working with the login example here, I only need one table, and that table is going to be a user table. So I'll put it right here above the forms. I'll call this user. That's going to be the name of the table, and it inherits from db.model. It's going to have 4 columns in it. The first column is going to be the ID column, which I won't have to do anything with. It will be handled automatically. So this is going to be an integer, and it's going to be the primary key. And then I'll have the 3 fields that I'm actually interested in. So username, it's going to be a string field, and it's going to be at most 15 characters because of what I put in the login form. So 15. And I want it to be unique. So unique is true. And then I have an email field. So this will also be a string. And I put the max email length is 50. So it's going to be a column with 50 characters. And I want it to be unique as well. And then finally, I have the password field. It's also going to be a string. And in this case, it's going to be 80 characters long. So I'll save that, and now I will create this table by using createAll. So from app import db, and I'll do db create all, and then I'll exit out of this, and I'll open up the database, and I'll do tables. So I see the user table, and if I select from this table, there's nothing. So everything is working so far. So now that I have the database, I actually want to allow a user to register. So by register, I mean they put in the information, and that information gets saved into the database. So I'll work with the sign up form first this time instead of the login form. So what I'll do is I'll get rid of this. I'll comment it out for now. And instead of returning just the data that they put in, I'm going to actually put that data into the database. So what I'll do is whenever they create a user, so they pass in information, I'll create a new user by instantiating the user class that I just created for the database. And I'll pass in the data that they supplied. So username is going to be equal to form.username.data. the email is going to be equal to form.username.data, or sorry, email.data. And finally, the password will be form.password.data. So the password is going to be stored in plain text for now, but by the end of this video, I'll show you how to hash the password so it's not plain text anymore. But this is just for testing purposes because I don't want to do too much at once. So once they've passed in the data, I just add it to the database. So db session add this new user that I've created, and then I'll say commit, and then I'll return something like new user has been created. So I'll save that, and now let's test it out. So let's go to the sign up form, and I don't think I'm running the app, so that's why it's not doing anything. So username will be testing, email will be test@test.com, and password will be secret. So I'll sign up. It says new user has been created, so let's see if that is actually in the database. So I'll open up SQLite 3 again, database, and then I'll select star from user. And if it worked, I should see some data. And I do. I see 1 for the ID column, testing for the username column, test@test.com for the email, and secret for the password. So that works as expected. That's good to see. So I'll start the app again. And now I want to move on to the login form. So the login form is a little more complicated, but it's still fairly easy. So instead of having this return the data that was passed in, what I want to do is I want to check and see if the user exists in the database, and if it does exist, to see if the password matches. So first thing I'll do is I'll query the database for a user. So I'll say user is going to be equal to user.query, and then I'll filter by the username that is passed in the form. So form.username.data, and I'll get the first result because usernames are supposed to be unique. So I won't get more than one result here. And then I'll say, if the user actually exists, then I want to check the password. So then I'll say if the password from user, so let's say user.password is equal to the password they pass in, so the form password data, then I want to redirect them to the dashboard, meaning that they have logged in successfully and they can view the dashboard, which is going to be the protected area, but it's not exactly protected yet. So I'll return redirect and then URL for dashboard. And I need to import both redirect and URL for up here. So that's pretty simple. And if the username doesn't exist or the password is incorrect, I'll return invalid username or password, and I'll wrap that in header tags. So I'll leave this ugly for now because I won't focus too much on the case where it's not working, but I'll demonstrate it in a moment here. So server's running. I'll go to the login route, and I'll say the username is going to be, what was it? Test. And then the password was secret. So it says invalid username or password. So I think I got it wrong. I think the username was testing, and then the password was secret. Okay, so it worked. So because the password matched and because the username was found, it allowed me to go to the dashboard. If I try something else like a password that's obviously wrong, so I just typed in some random characters, it says invalid username or password again, which is exactly what I want. So now I pretty much have the login route working as well. And I won't have to do much to it except for add the security features to the login, which is something we can do right now. So first, let me clear out the database that I have created just so I can redo it because it has that plain text password in there. So I'll open up SQLite again. And then I'll delete from user. So if I select star from user again, there's nothing there, which is what I want. So now I'll open up Python again, from app import db create all, and then I'll exit. So I did that to get rid of the one entry that I need to do, and I just realized I didn't have to do that db create all again because I didn't delete the table, I deleted the row in the table. So that wasn't necessary. So I'll start the app again. And now to get it to work properly where I have the hashing, I'll import from work_circ security. So work_circ.security. I'm going to import two functions. One's called generate password hash, and the other one is going to be check password hash. So they're pretty simple to use. As you can imagine, the generation will be in the registration view, and then the check password will be in the login. So let's do registration first. So the only change I have to make here is I have to actually generate the hash password. So I'll create a variable here called hashed password, and I'll use the generate password hash function, and I'll pass in form.password.data. And then the method I'll use is SHA-256. And this will generate a hash that is 80 characters long. That's why I made the column in the database 80 characters long, and that's why I made the form 80 characters, even though it won't matter so much on the form. So now, instead of passing in the plain text password, I'll change it to hash password. So I'll save that and I'll give it a shot. So sign up, hash test, email hash@hash.com, and then password, I'll say hash. So I'll sign up. Now let's take a look at the database. Now we see, instead of the plain text password, I have this long hash here, which is exactly what I want. So now if my database gets broken into for whatever reason, they won't be able to see the actual plain text password, which is good. So now let me check the password hash on the login route. So here, instead of checking the password directly, so user.password and then checking it against the password that's passed in, what I'll do instead is I'll use the check password hash. I'll pass in the password from the table, which is the hash password, and then I'll compare it against the password that is passed in the form here. So I'll save that, and then I'll go to the login route. So login, and I'll say hash test, and password will be hash. And because the check for the hash worked, it directed me to the dashboard again. So we're almost done. The last thing that I want to do is I want to add Flask-Login to this. So first, let me import all the things that I need from Flask-Login. So from Flask-Login, I'm going to import Login Manager. I'm going to import User Mixin. I'm going to import Login User, Login Required, Log Out User, and Current User. So we'll be using those 6 things. So now let me initialize this. So login manager, and then I'll initialize the app, init app, pass in the app, and I'll set my login view to be login. All right. So now I need to modify my user class to use the user mixin, which is what Flask-Login uses to kind of inject some extra things into your user class. So I'll add that there. And then I'll also create the user loader. So there can be a connection between Flask-Login and the actual data in the database in a sense. So login manager is the decorator that I have to use, login manager.userLoader. And then if you see my Flask-Login videos, then this will make sense. So it takes in a user ID, and I'm going to query from my user class using some user ID. So now that that's done, I'm now going to add the login required decorator to my dashboard so you can no longer access it directly. So login required, and I'll save that and let's see if it works. So Python app, and init app is not defined, so this isn't an equal, it's a dot. Let's try that again. So now let's make sure the app works. If I go directly to the dashboard, it should redirect me to the sign-in screen. So dashboard, and then I have to sign in. So I think hash test was the last one I used, and the password was hash. And either it didn't work because I typed in the wrong password, so hash, or something's just not working correctly, which I'll investigate in a moment. But I definitely can't get to the dashboard without having logged in the first place, which is exactly what I want. So the reason why it doesn't work is because I haven't actually logged in the user. So basically what's happening is I'm typing in my name into the form, I'm hitting submit, and it's trying to redirect me to the dashboard. But I'm not actually logged in, so it redirects me back to the login screen. That's why it wasn't working. So to do that, I'll go to the login route here. And basically, right before I redirect them to the dashboard, I'll actually log them in. So I'll call login user, and I'll pass in the user that I am logging in, and I'll set remember to be equal to whatever they check on the form. So form.remember.data. It's a Boolean value. It's either true or false. So I'll save that, and I'll try this again. So let's go to the dashboard, and it should redirect me here, which it does. So I'll do hash tests, and I'll do hash sign in, and now it redirects me to the dashboard because I'm logged in. So now that I'm on the dashboard, I'll quickly pass in the username that I'm using just to make it a little more friendly. So I'll say name is going to be equal to current user.username. And I'll go to the dashboard and I'll change this to display the name. Here we go. So it's going to use that. I'll refresh, and now I see welcome hash tests. So the last thing I want to do is create a log out route. So I will go here. I will say this is going to be log out. It's going to be required log in, and then log out. And what happens when they reach this route is it's going to log out user, and then I'm going to redirect them to the index. So return redirect URL for index. So that should be it for the Flask part. And then what I need to do here is find the logout link. Where is it? Here it is. And it's going to be URL for log out. And that should do it. So I'll refresh this. If I click log out here, it sends me back to the home page. And if I try to go to the dashboard again, I have to log in once again. And that's it. So now we have our app done, and each one of the routes works. So I can log in, I can sign up, and then I can see the protected dashboard. So as you can see, I had to use quite a few things, but still, it's not that much code to get all this working. I had to use Flask-Bootstrap, Flask-WTF, SQLAlchemy. I had to use some security from WorkSerg and Flask-Login. But once I had all those things, I was able to create this app pretty easily. And I think it works pretty well as a start to any app that you would want to build that has to have some kind of login system and protected pages. So I will post this code somewhere online, and I'll give you a link to it in the description below. And in addition to this code, I'll also post the code for the beginning part. So if you have any questions on this, just leave a comment in the description below, and I'll answer not the description below, the comment section below. Leave a comment down there, and I'll get to it. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, please subscribe. So thank you for watching this video. I know it was a long video. This is probably my longest video ever. And I will talk to you next time.